Hello. I'm tempted to begin today by saying anyone with a nervous disposition should maybe look away, because I'm going to be talking about the British economy, and it really is it is in a bad way. And I see no way that it can be turned around, and I will explain why in due course. But it's all looking pretty desperate, and I think we all sense this. I think throughout the country you'll find that people are generally very anxious about the future. Nobody is very positive, and I don't think things have ever been quite as bad as they are at the moment. But I wanted to first say something about the American economy, because what happens in America always affects all of us, and us in the UK particularly, because we are so involved with the US in terms of the US owns so many of our businesses and so on. Now, what seems to be happening is that right now everybody's piling money into AI. And the firms are spending hundreds of billions of dollars in investment in AI. And you can't help think it's a little bit like the dot-com phenomenon of 2000, which turned out to be a bubble. And you can't help thinking that maybe this whole AI thing is going to turn out to be a bubble. There's no doubt whatsoever that AI will profoundly change all our lives, and that goes without saying. But when you look at the amount of money being poured in, and the low returns, and when you wonder about where the returns are going to come from, you can't help thinking that's going to burst before very long. And when you look at the rest of the US economy, I mean, it's not doing that well. I mean, big firms like Boeing and General Motors and Macy's department stores, I mean, they're all hopelessly overborrowed and on the brink, and many of those might disappear, and many big American companies have already gone bust. And what with the effects of Trump's tariffs, a lot of other businesses are really likely to be really struggling. And so I think we should be concerned about what's going on in America. The whole idea of the tariffs was so crazy, and it clearly hasn't been a success. Indeed, I think there's some suggestion that the courts might overturn them, and in which case any tariffs that have been paid since they were introduced would have to be returned, which would be an absolute catastrophe. But as I say, I think we should be aware of what's going on in America and be quite concerned about it. But what I really want to talk about is the British economy, which I think is in a much worse state than the American economy. I mean, we really are in trouble. And I have to say that, and I know people will disagree, but I have to say that most of this dates back to Brexit, when we decided that we would pull ourselves out of the EU and go it alone and find new markets and conquer the world, like we did when we had an empire. And when you look at what's happened since we left, and you look at how we've had 6 prime ministers, none of them has known how to cope with Brexit, least of all Keir Starmer. And when you look at the billions of pounds we've spent, and the time and effort and money devoted to just make it more difficult to deal with the EU by erecting barriers, and how for small and medium-sized companies, as I've said so many times before, it is almost impossible to deal with the EU. Remember, this is the biggest, richest, most successful market in the world, and we make it almost impossible for small and medium-sized firms to deal with them, because firms in the EU don't want the paperwork. They don't want all this unnecessary hassle. And that's really worrying for the future, because how are small and medium-sized firms going to grow if they can't export to the nearest market? And it's, I think, generally acknowledged now that we lost some 100 billion of trade by leaving the EU, and that amounts to something like 40 billion of taxation. And when you think how last year Rachel Reeves told us all that she'd found this big black hole in the accounts, and that she had to raise taxes of 20 to 30 billion, and this was done largely by increasing employers' national insurance, which of course was a deterrent to employing, and we were told that was it. Once the finances were straight, this was all paid off, and then everything would be fine. And now, less than a year later, she's telling us she's going to have to raise another 20 to 30 billion. The answer is that we're a losing enterprise, GB Limited. We're losing money all the time, and we're having to borrow. We're borrowing now almost, I think it's 95% of our GDP. And we're having to pay very high interest, higher interest than most countries. Germans, for example, are paying on 10-year bonds, they're paying 2.1%, we're paying 4.7%. And the interest that we're paying on our borrowing, on our national debt, is £105 billion a year, £2 billion a week. I mean, that's a lot more, half as much again as what we spend on the entire education system. It's 2/3 of what we spend on the NHS. And still we can't make ends meet. And there are so many other problems that we have, when it comes to we talk about growing the economy and so on. We are notorious throughout the world for our low productivity. Low productivity is a result of lack of investment, lack of training, and you have to wonder who's going to invest in businesses in the UK. And we've nothing special to offer. We don't have huge deposits of rare earth, or we don't have anything really that sets us apart. We were the financial capital of the world for a very long time, but now, of course, that has diminished, and London is a much less important centre now. Instead, it's spread throughout in Milan and Frankfurt and Dublin and so on. And so even that sector is now weaker than it was. And we've got little industries like film and TV, when we were very strong, very powerful in that sector. But we're being told, the government often tells us, that we're the third biggest IT centre in the world, the third most important IT sector in the world. Well, if you're a mouse in a field with two other elephants, then you'll be the third biggest animal. But yeah, we're nothing compared with America or China. We don't have the money, the resources to invest billions and billions in data centres and all the rest of it. And not only that, the temptation for anybody in the UK doing well in IT to go off and sell to the Americans or go work for the Americans must be very strong. And so much of our infrastructure and our business has been sold to foreigners. When you think about electricity and gas and water, railways, telephones, airports, ports, so much of them are now owned by foreigners. And when you go down the high street, if you can find a high street with any shops in it, if you go to a shopping centre, look at all the major brands, see how many of them are British. Very few of them. And so even if the economy was to recover, all the profits that all these enterprises make, the utilities and the shops and so on, all these profits are going to go abroad anyway to foreign shareholders. It's been crazy over the last, since Thatcher's time, to just sold stuff off. But we've been selling stuff off to keep going. And when we want to try and improve our infrastructure, like building a HS2, takes forever and ever and ever. Chinese in 40 years built 25,000 miles of high-speed rail and all the stations and all the rest that goes with it. We've been years and years and years. I was in short trousers when they started talking about HS2. It's 100 miles, London to Birmingham. And so how can you expect to compete if it's so difficult just to build a railway? And our planning is so slow. It takes forever to get planning. And then we've got 9.1 million people of working age who are not working. I mean, how can you expect to turn an economy around with that number of people not working? What are they doing? How many of them are claiming benefits? Have they given up? Have they just said, well, there's no chance I'll ever buy a house, there's no chance I'll be able to afford to have children, so I'll just sit home and play on my PlayStation instead? We've got desperate labour shortages in lots of sectors, particularly in care. And apparently quite a lot of care workers now from Nigeria. Well, we're putting a stop to all that. We're not letting any more of them coming. So it's going to get worse. And whether the idea is that these 9.1 million people, they should go and do all these jobs that we lack people for. I mean, construction workers and hospitality and hospital workers and nurses and doctors. All these people, 9.1 million home playing on their PlayStations. Are they the people who are going to have to do all these jobs? Because we don't want foreigners doing them. We don't want any more foreigners here. That's been our big problem. We've got low wage growth and we've got stubborn inflation, and everybody's concerned about the cost of living crisis. Sadly, we've got a Prime Minister who's very weak and doesn't seem to know what he's doing. He seems very concerned about what Farage and Reform are doing. He seems to base a lot of his policies on what they're doing, and at a time when you want somebody to be very, very decisive and very determined, he's a real ditherer. And you have to say that whilst he's hopeless, I mean, nobody could have sorted out the economy the state it was in when he became Prime Minister. I mean, there's a lot of smiles and they're all very happy when they became the new government, but the job is beyond them already, and now it's even more difficult. And so what they do, they say, well, we're going for growth. That was the answer, wasn't it? You don't hear it much now because they realise that it doesn't mean anything. Going for growth. Well, going for growth, you can do that by the reason we left the EU was to go for growth by going for business deals all over the world. And I think having lost 4% of GDP from leaving the EU, we've now made up, I think, between being members of CPTPP, countries as far away from us as you can possibly get, and deals with Australia and New Zealand. I think between them all we've got something like sort of a quarter of 1% back, or we might gain a quarter of 1% in 10 years' time. In other words, we've got nothing. In other words, the whole idea about increasing exports to all these new markets was just pie in the sky, and we have the humiliation of Starmer going over to Trump with his sort of little begging letter and his state visit. And if you're unable to grow the economy by exporting, well, what can you do? You can get people out spending at home. So if everybody goes out and spends money, then the shops will start doing better, and that might help things a bit. But how do you grow an economy? How do you get people to go out spending money if they haven't got any money? We have at the moment the highest taxes ever. We've got stagnant wages, got some of the lowest state pensions anywhere in the world, and certainly well below the EU average. We've got the highest energy prices in Europe, and for any firm or for any individual, energy prices, you've got to pay them. We all need energy. And we've got the highest transport costs. Our railways are the most expensive in Europe, and a large proportion of them are owned by European railway companies. We've got ridiculously high house prices, so anybody with a house is either paying rent or they're paying a mortgage, and that's taking a huge chunk of their income. We've got council taxes going up all the time, despite the city centres are rotting. And if you do reach retirement age, you've got to pay huge fees for a care home. And so with all these expenses, everyone being bled dry right, left and centre, taxes going up and likely to continue to go up, where do you get the money from to spend in the economy to make the economy grow? And you can't just, you cannot come to any other conclusion than the fact that this is just going to get worse and worse. It's going to get more and more difficult. Taxes will go up. Energy prices, chances are, may go up. cost of living or continue to go go up when it comes to food prices and so on. And so it's really quite hopeless, and that's why I say it's it seems to me that it's all going to end in tears, and you have a government that's just impotent. They can do nothing except talk. But there is some good news, and I want to end on some good news. We've got four items of good news that I would like to just make you feel a bit happier. The first is that we've taken back control. We're now completely in control of our affairs, providing we do what we're told if we want to do any business with Europe or whatever. And London's doing fantastically well. Come to London. Have a look in Bond Street, have a look in Knightsbridge, have a look at Mayfair. There's so much money, you can't believe it. Rolls Royces, Ferraris, Bentleys, Lamborghinis, dripping with money. Restaurants are fantastic, hotels are fantastic. Some of the best, most expensive in the world, absolutely booming. A lot of it, of course, is catering to foreigners, the sort of foreigners who come to London to use our world-beating money laundering organisations, taking advantage of our tax havens. But that certainly is, it's a source of, which should be a source of great pride to us, how wonderfully well London is doing and how it's one of the richest cities in the world. Third thing is that we can be happy about is that Germany and France aren't doing very well. They're having a bit of trouble with their economies, and that's fantastic. It just shows that we're all the same. This is just to remind you that I now have a second channel called Michael Lambert Something to Think About, where every Wednesday at 6 o'clock I post a shortish video on different subjects, anything other than politics. Last week I was talking about how it seems that technology is dumbing us all down. It may be something of interest, and if it is, I'll leave a link in the description down below, and I hope you might have a few minutes to take a look, and if you could subscribe, I'd be extremely grateful. And finally, I think we should all be very happy for Nigel Farage, the man who single-handedly is more responsible than anyone else for our catastrophic, irreversible decline that we're experiencing following our departure from the EU. The man who was able to persuade a nation that if only we voted to leave, things would be so much better, and we've all seen the consequences. A man who now knows the solution to all of our problems and can solve them all, and a man who, with his gang, his rabble of loudmouths and amateurs and incompetents, is set to become the next Prime Minister. A man who has made $1 million or more on side hustles whilst being an MP and never seems to visit his constituency. So I think once he's Prime Minister, we'll be in very good hands, and let's hope that never happens. Anyway, that's it. I'm sorry it's a little bit depressing. If you watched this far, thank you very much indeed. If you haven't already subscribed, I really would appreciate it if you do so. And so hoping I haven't ruined your weekend. Until next time, thank you for watching, and bye for now.